I think we are, when you talk about compliance, we're talking about behavioral management. So compliance to law, how to increase compliance to law, all the different laws that we have in place, I think basically will require the same kind of initiatives or strategies. Yeah? So be it tax law or any other law, I think one of the main things that we need to focus on to increase compliance is actually how the public perceive the whole system and the law itself, right? So if they have full trust that the law is good for them, the law is administered in the best manner, fair and justly administered, is something that's that benefits the community as a whole. So if we can increase that perception and feeling among the public, that's the best way to actually or bring them to comply with the law, right? So that's generally how we will approach administering the tax system in this country. I think they will look, when we talk about how can we increase the trust of the public on the system itself. So you look from various angles, right? In terms of the efficiency of the system itself, I mentioned about just and equitable perspective of the law, of the administration of the law. In terms of increasing the transparency. Of course, when they can feel or see, then they will believe and the trust will increase from there. So we need to actually be more transparent in terms of how we administer the whole system itself. If certain offence to this certain taxpayer is dealt with in certain manner, that's to be transparent and that's to be seen that the same kind of treatment, no kind of, one is no fear or favor, but actually it is administered in a way that is giving the picture of equitable or the same kind of treatment for the same kind of matters, offense, or even any benefits that you give. So from every perspective, that's to be seen to the public. That's the transparency part of it. We have to increase the how public can see in terms of our position, right? There are many things that we have done and we continue to do more in future. For example, when there are certain matters, dispute, difference in opinion, how is revenue taking, what is the position of the revenue. So all this contributes to increase in transparency. What we do, where do we position ourselves? So at least from the beginning, the taxpayer or the public already know our position and how to deal with that. So transparency, of course, again, efficiency, that would increase the trust of the public, that to see that the whole thing is administered in the best way. So that's why the focus is actually more from the perspective of increasing the awareness, so they know about the law, they know about our position, they know about the whole that thing that they need to know in the tax system, increasing the awareness and educating, so they not only aware but also understand. When you know, then you understand, and we give the necessary services, whether it's advisory or even services, so that they can perform their obligation in the best and at ease, with no confusion, no complication. So when the awareness is increased and the understanding is there, and they are provided with the necessary assistance or services made available, easily available to them, this will be the sort of beginning of the journey of increasing the trust itself. Of course, the other side of it is how the revenue is administered. That's the government as a whole, right? So we are at the revenue generating portion, and that's on the expenditure itself. So it cannot just be increasing the trust at the collecting side. That's to be the whole thing. We have actually undergone a process of transformation of our IT background or services. It took us 2 years for the journey, where we actually integrated the various systems that has been developed over the past, I think, more than 15 years. Because this is, when we digitalize from in the mid-80s or even early 90s until today. That's more than probably almost 20 years of a journey. So the whole IT infrastructure was developed phase by phase, and we at one point we end up with various systems to cater or accommodate all the services that we have. So in order so that we have a more seamless kind of communication between these different systems, so we have transformed what an initiative that we call HITS, which is Hasil Integrated Tax Systems. So all these different systems that has been developed over the years to support our services are now integrated. So we will get a more real-time kind of situation. I think you can remember in the past where you make payment today, you can only see it in the ledger, probably the earliest will be tomorrow, and this is something that has changed now. And we have actually provided a single gateway for taxpayers to log in and see all things related to their tax matters, whether communication or even looking at their tax positions. So this is called My Tax, available for individual as well as corporate taxpayers. It's a single gateway where they can get the services and also view their tax position. So this is a major thing. So nowadays, when you do your e-filing, you don't need to wait until the next day to see it in your tax position. It's more real time. So it's a major transformation. I think we have gotten very good feedback from the taxpayers in terms of this transformation. So that's one of the things that we have done digitally, and lately I think up until now, more and more of the physical kind of services over the counter, be it lodgement of return or even making payments. And more recently is even the stamp duty process, where in the past we come to the counter with the document and there will be stamped with the hasil stamp there, right? So we have digitalized everything. Is now on an online system. So from income tax to stamp duty, it's done online now, which would make the service actually available not only during the 8 or 9 to 5 traditional way, or available at the office locations nationwide. It's actually 24/7 available service, and anywhere, anytime. So we hope with that, right? So taxpayers will have more avenues, and it will be more convenient for them to get these services. Of course, there's a lot more room for improvement, but the basic infrastructure is there now. One of the things that is a major thing that we are currently embarking now is actually establishing an e-invoicing environment in Malaysia. This is something that has been done in many countries. In fact, some has had it for more than 15 years. In this region, I think Philippines was the latest that has established it in a place, I think last year. So we are going to, in our timeline, we're going to start to have e-invoicing in place come June of 2024 with a certain group of companies with turnover of more than 100 million. So the timeline goes until 2027 for individual. This initiative is part of the grand scheme of making, I mentioned in terms of taxation more real time earlier, because again, in tax, something that, especially for businesses, right, something that is of huge importance is certainty. So if you want certainty, you cannot work on historical basis. Because at any point of time, you are not certain. You have to wait until the time is completed, and then you look backward and try to see how much your tax obligation. So we want to make it more real time. At any point of time, you know that you have complied with, and your obligation of tax, basically to some extent you know already. So with the help of e-invoicing, this will be made possible. And again, when we mention about real time, it is actually the journey of going to make compliance to be something that is, I would say, automatic. It's actually compliance by design, which means when you are in the system, it just happens. You just comply as you go along. That is, I think, the sustainable way of maintaining the level of compliance at the highest and at the maximum. We cannot continue to be doing it traditionally, hide and seek kind of situation, chasing and going after the non-compliance ones. So that is something that will have no end to it. So designing compliance into the system is a sustainable way of going forward. Yes, so one is that actually the digitalization of economy nowadays has made it a lot easier to bring those in the shadow economy into the net, sort of. So with e-invoicing, for example, right? So there can no longer be, when this is all done, I mean all sectors are in the e-invoicing, you can no longer be doing business in the country if you are not in the system, right? Unless something that is illegal. I mean illegal activities. So obviously that's done under the radar. So that's definitely going to reduce the shadow economic size. Hopefully it will be reduced to just the illegal activities, right? So all legal activities will be captured within the net. That is the intention. How to handle the illegal activities, that's a different story altogether. But this is something that is made possible, as I mentioned earlier, because of technology nowadays. In the old days, you do business manually, you make payment more on a cash basis. This is a part of the shadow economy. So if everything is electronic, especially when there is an increased e-payment mechanisms, right? So everything will be captured within the system, so we can reduce that. And when we have sort of design compliance into the system, so the resources, one part of the resource is to maintain the system, right? But the other part of our resources can look for those who are outside of this net, so-called. So we can have greater focus to look for those outside of the net to bring them in. Because we know once they are in the net, they are compliant a lot already, right? So you just manage the infrastructure. I think this is something that is inevitable. Artificial intelligence, using robotics in a process. So something that we cannot do without. Businesses are more online based on digital platform nowadays. A lot of businesses, you don't see them physically, especially in the services industry, right? Even in the retail businesses, you don't see shops sometimes. There are businesses that actually do retail but don't hold any stocks, right? So they just manage in terms of from a supplier or producer to the consumer. So if we don't make ourselves up to par with this development, definitely we'll be missing a lot in terms of ensuring that these are inside the net. Of course, in terms of the training in the necessary fields, so no longer just looking at tax law and accounting perspective, but more and more, in fact, in technology. So we are creating more people who are good in the business process itself, but also at the same time in the technology process, because they have to be merged to support each other. In fact, to the IT industry now, they used to be support services, right? But now they should be the driver of the organization. Otherwise, you'll be slacking behind. I would say even not only now, we have started a few years back to actually recruit people from various industries. I don't know if you can find in any tax organization where you have engineers. In the tax field itself, you have people in the science field, so not just business, accounting, but also in other areas. And of course, from technology. So we have many from IT background, whom we recruit and train in the business, in the tax law and accounting, but they have with them the technology knowledge. So if it's red and blue between technology and business, right? So we will be creating more purple people. In terms of the law itself, of course, there are incentives that will actually encourage green adoption of green technology. We heard about guitar and all that. So that's from the law perspective, right? On ESG. Social-wise, the law also provides for a lot of incentives for upskilling of the workforce, right? And of course, from the governance, we have initiatives like the tax corporate governance framework, where a cooperative compliance is the direction that we are going. So compliance is not just the revenue side on the enforcement and taxpayer side on the compliance to the law, but actually a cooperation between the two to actually increase. I mentioned about certainty, and of course it will increase trust when you cooperate along the way. So it goes in line with the ESG, actually, all these initiatives I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I must first congratulate. I I thought it was a very major and successful event conducted by MIA. I was informed almost 4,000 or even was it 3,000? So 3,500 people. I mean, from the station participated. So, congratulations on that, on the success. And I think the topics chosen was also very current and relevant. But in terms of the accounting professions and tax itself, I mentioned about the journey is actually towards compliance by design, increase more cooperative compliance. So I think the professionals also will have to shift in terms of their role. This is actually not unique to this particular profession. So are the others. Because of technology, it has disrupted a lot of things, but disrupt in a good sense. Yeah. So we are moving in a one or two steps higher or better than how we used to do things. So I think in the accounting professions also, your role as the intermediary between the tax-paying community and the tax authority has to change because I think it started from as a preparer, right? As a tax preparer, as a tax maybe mitigator when there are disputes, right? So that's why your role is. But when that was in a situation where tax was historical in nature. So this year you compute what was your tax last year, right? So when we go to more real-time situation, increase cooperative compliance activities, I think the role of the profession has to change also. Yeah. Looking at more rather than handling risk, but actually predicting and trying to avoid risk. Right? In the past, it has happened. So how to handle it? But in future, your role, the role of the profession should be looking at how to mitigate, how to avoid risk. What are the potential risks in terms of tax? That is right. Advisory in terms of how best businesses should be handling their tax matters. So from historical to future, current and future. So that takes a lot in terms of, because historical, the skill is more on computation, argumentative, right? So going forward, it has to be planning. I think the profession has to understand the business also more than in the past, right? Because when your role is just looking at figures and trying to see what is the tax obligation from that, you have to understand the business, because I mentioned about identifying potential risks so that your clients, are spared from whatever future risk or trouble that they could have gone to. So that should be the direction. So that would be in line with the tax authority also. I've mentioned. So we will be looking at managing the behavior. So we're not focused on just the revenue. All right. So we're managing the behavior. How can we increase? How can we avoid this behavior? How can we steer the behavior to the right direction?